I'm Howard Brock. I was the associate producer on Anger Management. Anger Management was a FX series. We did 100 episodes. We just finished in December. It's now going to live on in syndication forever because there's 100 episodes. And I'm going to give you a rundown of how we did our post-production and how we were so efficient and so cool, and why not? So, we shot at fabulous Tamarack Studios in Sun Valley, a 60,000 square foot warehouse that's been turned into production stages and such. It's at the Lancashire off-ramp of the 5. If you've ever been there, you also know that there's nothing of any value, especially culinary, in that area. We were next to a auto dismantler, a paper shredding plant, and a freeway off-ramp, so it made the sound guy really happy. I'll give you a rundown of what was where. There was stage A, which had permanent sets. There was basically a big aisle down the middle and sets on either side. Swing sets were on stage C. That other stage that doesn't have a name was actually used as the mill. The offices held the writers, accounting, art department, that sort of stuff. The ISIS lived next to the men's room. Shocker. And then, of course, post-production, they didn't have room for us in the main building. They stuck us in a trailer in the parking lot. So the show was it worked on a 1090 model. There's a company called Debmar Mercury. They pioneered this with Tyler Perry shows. And the deal was they sold 10 episodes of the show at a discount to a cable network. The deal was if the show hit a certain ratings target, the network was obligated to buy 90 more episodes, so they would have 100 shows for syndication. So they did. So the good news was we had 90 shows. The bad news is we had 2 years to do them. And that's 45 shows a year. It's basically double the normal workflow. Normal shows do 22, 23 episodes a year. We're doing 44 to 46. So it's kind of like a marathon, and you hit the ground running, and there's really no let up. You know, if you're going to do 90 shows, it's important to be efficient because you have 90 opportunities to go, oh my God, what was I thinking? This is really stupid. So I'm going to go through the way things used to be done, the way things are usually done, and then the way we did it, which isn't either of the above. So first way, old way, remember these guys? Yep. Old technology from the previous century. Tradition, camera to tape. 4 cameras, 4 tape machines, 4 tapes in each machine. Just happens to work that way. So you end up with 16 tapes when you're done with shooting an episode as a rule. By the way, our show was not an audience show like some sitcoms are. Performed in front of a live audience. Not us. We're a block and shoot show because we were shooting 2 shows a week. So first off, you can't do that with an audience. Second off, the actors would never remember their lines. I can prove that. Trust me, he was very good. But you know, they're dealing with they're dealing with 2 half-hour shows a week, and stuff gets rewritten between the first take and the second take. So that's not conducive to having an audience. So once you get the stuff shot, you do your traditional tape-based ingest, which is how you got to get those 16 tapes played at real time into an Avid. You have to change the metadata because nothing has a scene or take number on it or a camera information. And then usually it goes into DNX36 because, oh my God, it's multicam. We can't do the bandwidth. Oh my God. So that comes out to 8 hours of logging and capture per day, minimum, because we'd shoot 2 to 2.5 hours a day, 4 cameras. That's 8 to 10 hours. I'm going to take the low end of the scale here, and I'm not going to include the logging, which also adds to it, because it's still ridiculous. So 90 episodes times 8 hours times 2 days comes out to 1,440 hours, or a massive 36 weeks of digitizing. Not efficient. Not the way we want to go. And the other thing is, you really don't get your dailies until the next day. That's why they're called dailies, because they come the next day. So now everybody's doing files. Ooh, new files. That's better. We don't have to use tape. Oh, cool. Okay, good news. So you've got different QuickTime-based recorders that are out there. These are some of them. There's more. Most of them use QuickTime. Some record ProRes, some record DNX, some record AVC HD. Most of them, almost all of them, are using QuickTime. Why? It's ubiquitous. You can send it to your friends. You can use it in any platform. You can use it on Avid, you can use it on Premiere, you can use it on Final Cut. So it's sort of like the least common denominator. However, if you're working on an Avid show, not so good. there's a catch with that because there's an extra step involved and that takes time. So we've effectively gone from camera to tape machine to Avid, DNX36, tape machine to another Avid, DNX175. Now we have files. So we haven't changed any parts of the steps. We haven't eliminated anything. We just go a little bit faster because QuickTime files go in faster than tape. They don't have to go in real time. They go in about 4 times speed. But we still have to deal with the metadata. We still have to deal with the fact that it has to be imported rather than just sort of show up. And I'll get into why that is later. So it's faster than tape, but it's still slow. It's 4 times faster. We now got our 36 weeks down to 9 weeks. Cool. Not quite enough. And you still have to deal with the metadata. So trick next was, how do we simplify it? How can we make this thing go faster? Because, like I said, we're doing 90 of these things. Efficiency is going to be helpful. Another way to simplify. What steps can we remove from this process to make things go faster? That's how many we removed. So effectively, we recorded the camera at DNX175. We gave up on offline resolution. And we skipped the whole part about putting in a QuickTime file, importing the QuickTime file, and changing the metadata. We effectively did this. Camera goes into the Avid at 175. Boom. That saved quite a bit of time. So here is our workflow. CineDecks, we used RX models. They're the size, remember those black and white 9-inch monitors everybody used to have back in the last century? That's about how big they are. Each one can record 2 channels. It can record 2 different codecs. It can record H.264 as well. It can record at 2 different locations. So that's a whole bunch of 2s. So what happened is 2 cameras go into one CineDeck. The CineDeck talked to the ISIS and also went to local storage on an SSD drive. 2 more did the same thing, went to the ISIS, went to an SSD drive. A 3rd one was there as a hot spare. And what that did is record a quad split in H.264 that went to a light iron server that fed iPads on the set. So the cool part was we had instant dailies. Anybody on set with an iPad and the proper software was able to, they'd have a list of all the scenes and takes with the correct scene and take number, and they could pull it up and play a quad split and see anything they wanted to see. It also gave the crew an excuse to bring their iPads to set so they could watch baseball games and check on scores and emails and stuff like that, because for some reason, every time I went to the set, that seemed to be what they were doing. So every time we would finish a scene, would be check the gate. Anybody know what check the gate is? Okay, check the gate, for those of you who don't know, back in the film days, somebody have to go look in the film gate to make sure there wasn't a hair hanging down that would have ruined the take, which would necessitate a reshoot. The equivalent in our case is, did we get the media? Did everything work okay? Now the advantage of that is we could check it immediately afterwards. And most file recorders that are used on cameras or even remotely, playing stuff back, sometimes a pain in the ass. You know, yeah, I can record it. Can you play it back? Really? So in a lot of cases, you're pretty sure you got it, but you know, really you don't know for sure. In this case, we'd play anything back whenever we wanted to. Actually, we didn't have to play it back. We'd actually have it in the Avid and know it was there. Yep, it's here. Okay, good. So dailies became minutelies. I'm going to trademark that. Thank you. So there were no surprises, and the sets could be struck immediately after they finished the scene instead of tomorrow. Once the stuff was shot, all we would have to do is literally move the MXF files into the Avid Media Files folder. It would take 30 seconds to 2 minutes for the Avid to index it, depending on how far into the show we were. You know, if the show's just starting, there's nothing in the folder, it goes quick. 2 days later, there's more stuff. It takes longer. That was the longest part of bringing in dailies. Maybe 2 minutes, usually less than a minute. So once it finished indexing, all you do is you move the AF file into a bin. Your metadata's there. You sort them, you group them, you're done. Our dailies processing time went from real time with tape, 8 to 10 hours, to QuickTime, 4 times faster, 2 to 3 hours, to CineDeck, 8 to 10 minutes. So I figured over the course of 2 years, we spent maybe 12 hours bringing stuff in instead of 36 weeks. Seems faster. So I'm going to go into the esoteric part. Most of these QuickTime recorders can't record into Avid storage for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have a network connection. Or if they do have a network connection, they can't see an ISIS as a client. They might have a network connection that says, I can talk remote to the other items here, but I can't send data or files out to an ISIS. The other reason is they don't put it in the right format. First off, it's not MXF, and second off, it's in what's known as OP1A as opposed to OP Atom. And what is OP? Funny you should ask. So MXF has operational patterns. Did you ever wonder why standards is a plural instead of a singular? This is one of those reasons. OP1A, basically audio and video are lumped together in a file, just like they would be on a tape. Why do camera manufacturers or tape machine manufacturers mostly put their stuff into OP1A files? Because it's the same as putting it on a tape. It's easy for them. Oh, here's the file, here's the material. Put it in a file, don't put it on tape. Okay, we can do that, that's easy. OP Atom is the way the Avid wants it. It wants the audio and the video separate. Why? Because oftentimes the audio and the video go the separate ways when you're finishing. And oftentimes the audio is almost always the same format, and the video is almost always a different format of, it's like soda and syrup in a fountain. So the syrup would be the codec, ProRes, DNX, H.264, whatever. And the soda is the audio file. It's probably going to be PCM. Okay. So the only file-based system out in the market that records OP Atom files is Panasonic P2. So that's why you could bring in P2 material before AMA existed directly into an Avid without having to go through any extra steps because it was in the right format. And that's kind of critical in terms of how the difference between using QuickTime files as opposed to using MXF native OP Atom files. So we're going to get into wrappers. Wrappers are like containers. QuickTime is a wrapper, MXF OP1A is a wrapper, MXF OP Atom is a wrapper. All a wrapper is, it's just basically a file header that tells you what's inside, okay? That's not to be confused with codecs. Codecs are like flavors. So you've got your Diet Coke, you got your Pepsi, and then you probably have, you're never going to order sun-kissed orange soda out in public, but you're probably going to have it at home. Here's the problem. When you bring a QuickTime file into the Avid wants it to be OP Atom, so it basically has to distill it. It wants to turn it back into syrup and soda. It doesn't come out of the can as syrup and soda, it comes out mixed. So you have to unmix it and bring it in. That takes time. We don't want to do that. So that's why we use the CineDeck, because the CineDeck does this. So you got the right format, you don't have to do an import, and even if you're not in the situation we were in, where we had the ISIS on location at the same location as where we were doing our editorial and our production, even if you brought the material in off of a SSD drive, for example, all you do is literally copy the stuff into the Avid Media Files folder and you're done. You don't have to go through an import process or anything like that. And that, I would estimate on our stuff, maybe would take half an hour per day instead of like no time at all because it was already there. That's still going to be faster than 2 to 3 hours, last time I looked. So the other thing is that the record is just entering the metadata, the scene and the take number, and each channel on the CineDeck is set to encode the camera information, and that's added to the clip name. So when the stuff comes into editorial, it's got the scene, the take, the show, and the camera. Nobody has to rename anything. And if you ever had to rename stuff, you would be happy. And we also have a secondary recording on a local drive, so we always have a redundant thing going. Just to give you an idea, 4 HD cam decks, 16 HD cam tapes, and an HD cam and an Avid cost the same as renting a CineDeck. All right, that's a wash. But here's where the savings come. Anybody work as a digitizer on sitcoms? Good, your job just went away. There's about $3,400 a week that we didn't have to spend. We didn't have to have 2 Avids with decks. We didn't have to have an assistant digitizing stuff along with the other assistant who was assisting and digitizing. And we didn't have to have another Avid. We didn't have to wait a day. So, and then there's also the tape costs. One show is about $800, 10 shows, $8,000, 100 shows. That's $250,000 between the tape costs and the assistant. There's the compelling economic argument for that part. So we go into offline. So here was our post-production workflow in terms of how things worked. First thing is, in the middle, everything's connected to the ISIS. We're not moving media around. That made things a whole lot easier because we weren't spending a lot of time putting stuff on a drive, sending it somewhere else and having them tell us what we left out, which happened on the first 10 shows. So do the offline edit, lock the show, do a turnover, send media and an AAF off to the sound house, send an AAF to the DaVinci. How long does it take to send an AAF to DaVinci without any media? About a minute. Actually, it takes longer for the DaVinci to open it to go find the media than it takes for us to send it the information. Color corrected, and then it goes into a symphony in-house where we do the online, put the titles on, fix any mistakes, which there were. When we're done with that, that goes onto a FireWire drive, goes to JCam, where we have to output it to tape. This show started 3 years ago. File delivery was beginning to happen. Lionsgate wasn't comfortable with that, so we had to do an SR output. So the reason we took a 4-pound drive to JCam was because we didn't want to take an 80-pound SR deck to the office. Because we're only doing this on average once a week, but it wasn't really every week. It was more like, we do a few at once. And then VFX, the sound mix, the QC, and the final duplication was all done outside. That was once the show was finished. The audio tracks from the mix would come back. We get all the stems. So we brought those in and we put them into a timeline. So if I wanted to have all of the original stems by dialogue, music effects, those were all available on one timeline, and then a 5:1 mix along with the stereo mix was on another timeline. And the advantage of that was I had basically had the equivalent of the online master in the Avid. And if somebody would call up and say, we have a QC problem, there's a clicking sound on this part of the scene, you'd go, okay, you listen to it, and you go, yeah, that actor has dentures. Sorry, it was recorded that way, we can't fix it. Too bad, we run along. So once we'd finished the show, we would archive them onto LTOs. We kept a G-RAID of the original media. We put 2 shows on a 4 terabyte G-RAID. So we had all the shows, original material available. And because we had a 32 terabyte ISIS, we were able to keep all of the onlines for all of the shows online all the time. The advantage to that was when we got into doing syndication later on, all of the media was still available, and it was available with handles, and we had all the stems available. So that made doing the syndication much easier. Also meant that we didn't have to restore anything, because restoring is almost as sucky as putting something on an LTO to begin with. So also, because the show was a block and shoot show, we didn't have an audience, but the executive producer wanted to have live laughs whenever possible. So when there was time, we would play back a finished episode and then record a live audience, recorded in front of a live audience. They would laugh, hopefully, and we record that. The cool part was we'd play it back off at CineDeck that was looking at the ISIS. So we could literally do this at the very last minute if we had to, and we did a few times. When we did it on the first 10 shows, we didn't do it in-house, and we didn't have CineDecks. So what we have to do is we'd have to rent an XD-Cam deck, put it out on the XD-Cam, take the XD-Cam deck to a soundstage, record it on the soundstage, get the DVDs from the audio guy, bring them back to the office. Somebody would stay late or come in really early because they had to have it ready on Monday morning so the executive producer and the editor could go through and figure out which laughs they were going to use and which ones they didn't care for. When we did it with the CineDeck, literally on one CineDeck, you can play it back on one channel, record the laughs on the other channel. It took 5 minutes after the show was done to get it dropped in. We did our finishing in-house. Caution, your actual mileage may vary. The reason for that, in our case, we were doing such a tremendous volume, and because we wanted to have more control over it, and because I have an online background, it was just easier. So there's other cases where people want to have very valid reasons for going to a post house. The advantage to that, in our case, we didn't have to worry about scheduling conflicts. We didn't have to copy any media. That makes things easier. We didn't have to do things by remote control. I didn't have to call somebody up and go, there's a boom shadow in the upper right-hand corner. And then if there were fixes and changes, we could do them quickly. So some advantages. We could fix a lot of stuff. For example, boom shadows, flies. We always had flies. The eating area was right next to one of the entrances to the stage. And sometimes they would leave the door open. And sometimes the flies that were literally congregating by the trash can next to the entrance to the stage would decide to go be on camera. And then I would have to take them off camera. So we had tape marks, set extensions, errant production gear, TVs and computer screens we'd drop in, undergarments needed to be removed or added. Charlie bedded a lot of women. They all wore bras. Sometimes they'd try to hide them, sometimes not effectively. Sometimes we'd have to move the sheets to cover up the fact that they were wearing a bra when it wasn't supposed to see a bra. So we ended up, by doing all of these wonderful things, the traditional budget on the show was $50,000. We came in about $25,000. Multiply that by 90, that's another, it's over $2 million. One of the things that's critical about this is you got to look at the whole system and how everything fits together. Because somebody could look at it and go, well, the CineDecks cost the same as having recorded on tape when we just recorded on tape. Well, you're going to save money over here, you're going to save money over here. And because of the way we did stuff, we saved money on syndication. We saved money in a lot of different ways, but if you just focused on one part of it, you may not see the overall picture of how much money you could save and how effective and efficient you could be. Fortunately, we had a very supportive producer. That helps a lot. So we saved money by having a small staff. We had an associate producer who happened to be an online editor. We had an editor, had an assistant editor, we had a post coordinator, and we had a freelance colorist who would come in every couple of weeks when I'd say, it's time, and we didn't have any overtime. So we cranked out 90 shows, 2.5 years, no overtime, none. We put stuff on an LTO to archive it, cost a massive $25 per show. Each show was 800 gigs to 1.2 terabytes. So it would almost invariably fit on one LTO. If it took more than one LTO, that show had problems. And then we get 14 online episodes on an LTO. The ISIS had 32 terabytes. And this is, hats off to JCAM here. When we spec'd the show, Lionsgate required us to get bids from other companies. So we said, well, we need a 32 terabyte ISIS. And they went, okay, here you go. And they'd spec it out, and we'd look at it, and we go, that's not gonna work. Because they didn't think about the throughput, all they thought about was the capacity. And you couldn't do it the way they'd expected, which made the decision easy. Because of that, we had enough capacity to keep all 100 episodes online in addition to whatever episodes we were working on. And that became tremendously valuable, especially when we got into syndication. But it also became valuable any other time when somebody goes, I need some clips of Noreen for some show she's doing, and you'd have to go back 5 shows. It's like, okay, here you go, I got it. Or, I have to do a syndication thing. We'll get into that in a little bit. It made syndication so much easier because everything we needed was already available. So, and now we're going to get into syndication. Hey, what a segue. When the show went into syndication, we had to pull a minute out of the show, and we also had to deal with make this safe for broadcast content. So take out any sexual innuendo. It's like, have you seen the show? You understand that basically you're telling us to take everything out of the show. Well, just the offensive stuff. Have you seen the show? So usually when you do an online, usually when you do a syndication cut, usually what would happen is they would digitize the finished show, and then they'd have to deal with, well, I've only got 2 tracks of audio, and I've only got this picture, and I don't have any handles and everything else. So it became kind of a pain in the ass and somewhat limited. Also, it meant that usually you sent out your audio and went to a place, back to the sound house, which went, syndication, I love syndication. And they would charge you a boatload of money to conform the show and remix the show. We didn't do any of that stuff. So we had to do some color correction. 60 of the 100 shows needed a shot or 2 added back in that came from production. So we, all we do is we'd load up the G-Array that had the show's original material on it. The editor would go find the shot he needed. We'd send that to the DaVinci, color correct a handful of shots. It took longer to load the thing in the DaVinci and for the DaVinci to find the media than it took to color correct the show and spit it back out again. So 10 minutes a show, we're talking maybe 12 hours for all 60 shows, and that was spread out over, a couple different really short days. And then because we had all of the audio stems and all of the audio elements, if we needed to go clean up some dialogue because there was like a laugh mixed in and we wanted it clean, we had the dialogue track. If we needed to extend a laugh, we had the audio, we had the laugh stems. We needed to move an audio or a music edit, we had the music stem. So we had everything we needed to fix the mix without having to go back and remix the show. That saved about another $168,000. And then because the delivery on the syndication episodes was file-based. We'd put 25 shows on a $75 drive and spend $25 to ship it off to Pittsburgh. 100 shows, $400 of shipping and media cost to deliver the episodes. If we'd done it on tape, it would have cost closer to $20,000. Just saying. So that's basically it. That's the end of my story.
Yeah.